was past midnight when silence swallowed everything, the kind of silence that feels wrong, because in the middle of vast empty farmland stood a small single-room house, and on its floor lay a severed human head, while just inches away a tiny stove burned quietly, cooking something unthinkable, and across that fire sat a tall, calm man with a peaceful smile, staring into the flames and whispering words that still chill investigators today. "Your strength is mine now. Your knowledge is mine now." A scene so disturbing that even hardened police officers would later struggle to describe it without their voices shaking. This case truly began in December 2000, when a respected local journalist received a late evening phone call at his office, spoke for barely a minute, and hurried out without explaining anything to his colleagues, something unusual enough to raise questions only after he never returned home. His phone switched off, his wife waiting through the night, and then the next day with growing dread, until a missing report was finally filed, and the police began digging into what first looked like an ordinary disappearance, only to uncover a terrifying pattern of men vanishing from nearby villages over several years, men from modest backgrounds whose cases were quietly forgotten, until one common name surfaced again and again in whispered conversations, a man known for strange beliefs, unsettling confidence, and an obsession with power, knowledge, and control. When the police finally brought this man in for questioning, his behavior was disturbingly theatrical, making demands, enjoying the attention, and eventually leading officers to an isolated farmhouse he called his court, where the true horror revealed itself piece by piece. First a hidden diary filled with names, everyone crossed out in red, and then the discovery of human skulls carefully preserved, cleaned, even color-coded, so he could remember who was who. As he calmly explained how he befriended intelligent men, earned their trust, lured them away, killed them, disposed of their bodies, and cooked their brains into soup, convinced that consuming them would transfer intelligence and strength into himself. All of it described without remorse, without hesitation, his eyes empty of guilt, as if he were explaining a harmless ritual rather than repeated murder. The missing journalist, the police learned, was killed differently from the others because he had discovered too much, silence before he could expose the truth, and after years of investigation and a long trial, the court sentenced the killer and his accomplice to life imprisonment for the murders of 14 men. Yet even today, the story refuses to rest, because from prison, he later claimed everything was fabricated, that evidence was planted, that the truth was twisted, leaving the public caught between documented records and chilling confessions, and reminding us of one disturbing reality. Monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they smile, speak softly, and live among us, believing with absolute certainty that what they're doing makes them more powerful, while the rest of the world only realizes the horror once it's far too late. I never believed in ghosts until I took that job at the old cement factory in Salt Lake City. It was back in 2010, right after the place had been abandoned for decades. The Portland Cement Works had shut down in the late 80s, but its reputation lingered like dust in the air. I'd heard the stories: workers crushed in machinery, boiled alive in vats, electrocuted or beheaded in freak accidents. More than a dozen documented deaths over the years, each one more gruesome than the last. But I needed the work, so when a group of entrepreneurs bought the site to turn it into a haunted attraction, I signed on as part of the cleanup crew. Little did I know, the real horror wasn't in the history books. It was still there, waiting in the shadows. The factory was a sprawling beast of a building, with towering silos, underground tunnels, and rooms filled with rusted gears and conveyor belts. We started the job in late summer, working long hours to clear out the debris left by transients and failed businesses. The air was thick with the smell of old concrete and decay, and even during the day, the place felt off, like eyes were on you from the dark corners. My first few shifts were uneventful, just hauling junk and patching holes. But as the days turned shorter and we pushed into evening hours to meet deadlines, things started to change. One night, around dusk, I was alone in the main processing area, sweeping up shattered glass from a broken window. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the floor. The others had gone home early, leaving me to lock up. I remember feeling a chill, even though it was still warm outside. That's when I heard it, the faint grinding of metal like gears turning in the distance. I froze, listening. The factory hadn't operated in years. All the machinery was seized up with rust, but the sound grew louder, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe pipes settling, but deep down I knew better. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the noise down a narrow corridor toward the old coal crusher room. The hallway was lined with faded warning signs, paint peeling like old skin. As I got closer, the grinding mixed with something else, a low moan, pained and human. My heart pounded in my chest, but curiosity pushed me forward. The door to the crusher room was ajar, creaking slightly as I nudged it open. Inside, the massive machine loomed in the dim light, its jaws of steel teeth frozen in place. The sound stopped abruptly, leaving only silence and the echo of my breathing. I stepped inside, shining the beam around. That's when I saw the stains, dark, irregular patches on the floor near the crusher's base. I'd read about George Howe in the old records, a maintenance worker back in the early 1900s, caught by his sleeve and pulled into the gears, his arm mangled first, then the rest of him, crushed beyond recognition. The thought made my stomach turn. As I turned to leave, the grinding started again, this time right behind me. I whipped around, but the machine was still. Then, a whisper cut through the air. "Help me." I bolted from the room, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the walls. The corridor seemed longer than before, the exit door farther away. Behind me, footsteps echoed, heavy, dragging, like someone injured following. I didn't look back. I just ran until I burst out into the night air, slamming the gate behind me. My truck was the only one left in the lot, and as I fumbled with the keys, I glanced up at the factory's silhouette against the moon. In one of the upper windows, a figure stood motionless, watching me. It was gone when I blinked. The next day, I confided in one of the owners. He nodded knowingly, saying the place had always been like that. Cursed, some called it. Paranormal investigators had visited before we started, documenting EVPs and cold spots. One even captured a voice saying George on tape. But we pressed on with the renovations, turning the site into Fear Factory, a haunted house that played on its real history. I stayed on as staff, thinking the incidents would stop once the crowds came. They didn't. During our first season in 2011, strange things happened nightly. Lights flickered in empty rooms. Tools vanished only to reappear in locked silos. One actor, dressed as a ghostly worker, swore something pushed him down the stairs, leaving bruises in the shape of handprints. Guests reported seeing apparitions that weren't part of the show. A man with a mangled arm wandering the tunnels, moaning in pain. I experienced it again myself one closing night. I was checking the underground passages, making sure no one was left behind. The tunnels were damp and narrow, lit by strings of bulbs that buzzed faintly. Halfway through, the lights dimmed, then went out completely. Pitch black. I called out, but my voice echoed back distorted. Then the grinding started again, closer this time, accompanied by wet crunching sounds like bones breaking. Panic set in. I fumbled for my phone's light, but it wouldn't turn on. In the darkness, I felt a presence, cold breath on my neck. "Why didn't you help?" The voice was ragged, accusatory. I stumbled forward, hands scraping the walls, until I found a ladder leading up. As I climbed, something grabbed my ankle, strong, vice-like, pulling me down. I kicked free and scrambled out, collapsing in the fresh air. After that, I quit. But the stories kept coming. By 2016, Fear Factory was famous, drawing crowds who wanted the real deal. News articles talked about its gruesome past, how the accidents had left spirits trapped, haunting anyone who disturbed the site. Paranormal teams confirmed activity, shadow figures, voices pleading for release. One investigator even communicated with George Howe, learning he died in agony, his soul bound to the machine that killed him. Looking back, I realized the factory never let go of its victims. It claimed them in life and kept them in death, drawing in the living to witness their pain. I drive by sometimes, seeing the lights of the attraction glowing at night, but I never stop. Some places are better left to the dead.
Thank you for watching. Like this video, comment what scared you most, and subscribe to stay with us.